Okay. So the Daf Yomi for Shabbos is Bava Kamma Daf Lamed, and we're going to start on Lamed Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the top. The Mishnah says, "Hashofech Mayim B'Rishus Harabim," that somebody who pours water into public, Uhuzik behind Achar, and somebody else gets hurt by that, he is going to be liable. You're liable for the damages. Chayv Benisko Hamatznias Hakotz. Excuse me, if somebody hides the thorns, vetazachuches, somebody who hides his thorns and his glass, vetazachuches, in the public domain, basically a person also, vagoder as gidro bekotim, if somebody makes a fence between his field and the public with thorns, vigader shenafel or shesaram, or if his fence falls into the public domain and the person who is in charge, who owned the fence, does not remove the stones, v'husku bahen acherim, and other people become damaged by them, then we're going to say, under all these circumstances, chayev benizkan, the person who is the owner of the thing that became damaged is going to be responsible for the damage they do to other people. So Amar Rav says, Lo Shanu, and Rav had taught this earlier, if you remember back on Chav Ches Amud Aleph, when do we say, when it says that if you pour the water into public and it damages somebody, you're liable? Lo Shanu Eladinatfu Kelo B'mayim. That's if the water ruins the clothing of the person. Avohu Atzmo, but if the person himself became hurt from this water, he's going to be patur, he's exempt. Why? Karka olam hizikaso, because the ground is what damaged him, and the person is not, and the person who spilled the water is not responsible for the damage from the ground, because that's what's called grama b'nizikin, indirect damage. So the Gemara says, "Armolei Rav Huna Rav." So Rav Huna says to Rav, "I don't understand this. Why, if the water, why do we say?" If he pours the water and the person himself got damaged, or the one who pours it is exempt. Lo ye show. Shouldn't this be like somebody who pours his dung, his mud into public, and so therefore, if somebody became damaged, even though it made it into mud, and so therefore it's his mud, and so therefore he should be responsible for the damages that were caused by the mud, even though he doesn't own the ground, he didn't make the mud. So the Gemara says, no. Do you really think? Says Rava to Rav Huna, Amar Alei Rava or Rav Huna, excuse me. So Rav Huna said to Rav, so Rav responds back to Rav Huna, he says, Misavras lo tamu maya. Do you think that we're talking about a case that the water, or do you really think that what we're talking about is a circumstance that it turned the ground into mud? That's not what our Mishnah is talking about. Our Mishnah is talking about a case b'ditamumaya, where the water became completely absorbed into the ground, and so therefore there was no mud anymore, and so therefore the person slipped from the ground in the public domain, and so therefore we're not going to make him responsible because it's the ground that damaged him and not the water. The Gemara says, "V'tarti lamaway." So we already learned this back on Daf Chav Ches. Why does it need to tell us twice? There it said if a person breaks his jug and the water spills, and another person slips on it, he's liable. And there Rav says you're liable for the utensils, but not for the damage to the body. So why do we need to be taught twice? The Gemara explains, Chada b'yamos hachama. And one is in the summer, and one is in the winter. We're being taught the same one both. The Tanya, because we learned, anytime we learned that a person is able to open their gutters and pour out from their caves their stuff from their house into the street, so in the summer they don't have permission, and in the winter they do have permission. And so we're being taught, even though they have permission to throw their water into the ground. Nevertheless, if they hurt people, they have to pay for it. That's the first thing. Second part of our Mishnah says that if you hide your thorns or your glass in public and you damage other people, you're going to be responsible. It says Rabbi Yochanan Says Rabbi Yochanan, Moshe, when our Chachamim say that the owner of the fence is responsible if the thorns stick out and damages people, that's only El Mafriach. That's only when it sticks into the public. But if it's really on his property, well, he's not going to be responsible. What's the reason why he's exempt by time of Potter? So Amar Ravacha Braid Raviko Fisha in Darkan Shal Bnei Adam was Chachek B'Ksam, because you don't assume that people are going to rub themselves against the thorns on your wall. And so therefore, if a person comes and rubs himself against your wall, the owner of the wall is not responsible to pay for it. So the Gemara says, the Gemara says, Tanar Rabbanan, let's say a matzniya kotzosa was chusosa b'toch kosel shachavera, ubo bal kosel v'sasar kosel. So let's say you stick your glass or your thorns into your friend's wall, and then your friend comes along and knocks down his wall, and as a result of that, the nafal or shusarabim v'ziko. And then when the wall falls into public, the thorns and the glass come out and they damage other people. So under those circumstances, we're going to say chayav hamatzniya, that the person who did this, the person who hid his stuff in his friend's fence, he's going to be liable for the payment. And it says Rabbi Yochanan, when do we say he's liable? Only if we expected this wall to fall down because it was a rickety wall. Then we're going to say he's liable of a bakosel bari. But if it's a very strong wall, hamatzniya pater, the person who hid it there is exempt because he placed it in a protected place. The chayav ba'al is the person who owns the wall whose job it is, because he knocked down the wall and it wasn't expected for the wall to fall down. So Amar Ravina, so Ravina says from this law from the Brisa, we're going to learn a principle, also Maris, Hamachaza Boro Bidalio, Shel Chavero. Let's say you a person covers up the pit with the cover of his friend without telling his friend that he's doing it. Ubabaldli, and then the person who owns this cover comes along, V'natal Dayu, removes his cover. Chai Ba'abor, we're going to say that the owner of the pit is responsible because he should have thought about the fact that the person who removed his cover. So, of course, the owner of the pit is going to be responsible. So Gemara says, Pshita, wasn't that obvious? So Gemara says that these two cases are the same. What's he teaching us? So Maldatim, he might have thought, Hassam, who with respect to hiding the wall and the rickety wall, we say he's liable. Because the person on the wall didn't know. And so he doesn't know who to tell that he's to take away your damage. And so therefore the person on the wall didn't do anything wrong. But in the case where somebody covers over the pit, the other way that the owner of the pit knows who the owner of the cover is. The owner of the cover knows who the owner of the pit is, and he could have said, he could have come along and told him, I'm taking away these things. And so since he didn't do it, he's negligent. I might have said that Kamash we said no, that the owner of the pit is negligent, and the owner of the guy who took back his cover is not the negligent one. Now we have some of the most famous lines in all of Shas. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us, Chasidim Harishonim, the initial original pious people. The original pious people used to put their thorns and their glass shards into their field, umamikin lahem, and they would dig them deep, 3 tfachim deep, because they didn't want to break the plow, because the plow would go 3 feet deep, so they would stick them even deeper. Rav Sheshes would put his glass and his thorns in fire, he would burn them. Rav Shadihu b'diglos, Rav would throw it into the Tigris River. Amar Rav Yehuda, Haiman debayu me'avi chasida. Rav Yehuda says a person who wants to be pious, what do you want? You want to be a pious person? So today there's the Daf Yomi for Yud-Tes Kislev. You want to be pious? You want to be a chassid? This is the Rosh Hashanah for Chassidim, because that's when the Alter Rebbe was released from prison. So it's known as the Rosh Hashanah for Chassidim. So a person who wants to be a real chassid, what does he need to do? He has to uphold the words of Nezikin. He has to act like these people who would hide their dangerous things deep into the fields. Rava says, Milei de Avos. Rava said that they should learn the words I've mentioned in Pirkei Avos, who says whatever's mine is yours and what's yours is yours. That's the true chassid. But Amrila, and some say, Milei de Brachos. What does it mean to be a pious person? And you need to say the words of Maseches Brachos, that means to say that they would sit an hour in prayer so that their words can come straight to Shemayim. Okay, so now we're up to the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Hamotzias Tivno, Vikasha or Shusarabim was the So somebody sticks their straw into the public domain. So they put their straw in the public domain in order to turn it into manure or fertilizer. And somebody slips on it. Then the person who put it there has to pay for the damages. And still, at the same time, even though he's responsible, whoever wants to come and take this object, take the manure, take the fertilizer, he's allowed to do it. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, "Call mekalkoin mershus rabim v'ziko." Anybody who places a hazard item in public and it does damage, chayavim l'shalim. Then he's responsible for the damage. But still, the kol hakodem en zacha. But whoever comes along and takes it first, it's theirs. And the Gemara is going to have to discuss how does this deal with the Bava Kamma. It seems to be the same thing. Another law is hahofech hasagalal. When we cited this in yesterday's daf, one who flips the dung in public domain, and then somebody else gets hurt on it, he's responsible for the damages. So the Gemara first starts by saying, let's say that our Mishnah that says that if you place the straw in public, you're responsible. Maybe our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Daniel Rabbi Yehuda on there. If it's a time where typically people would put their straw in public in order to make it into manure, into fertilizer, person can put it there. If it's sober, leave it there for 30 days. So that can become composted. Joshua allowed the people to stick their fertilizer, to make the fertilizer. People walking, allow them to stick it in the public. So our Mishnah, which says you're liable, must not be like Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, no, if you would take Rabbi Yehuda, you could do it, but Rabbi Yehuda said that if you did it, you have to pay for it. Gemara says, so Rabbi Yehuda says specifically, as it relates to Hanukkah, if you put the candles of Hanukkah outside of the store and somebody's ox takes the fire and makes a fire, then the owner of the store is exempt because he has permission to put it there. My are only saying Mishum Rishut Bezdin, that the court allows you to put it there, and we see from there that he's exempt from paying damages. And so too with respect to this case, when somebody puts their straw, since he has the permission of the court, he shouldn't be responsible. So how can you say Rabbi Yehuda says this? The Gemara says no. Lo tamim mishum reshus mitzvah. No. So don't say that the reason is not because he has permission of the court, but there by Hanukkah it's because he has a specific purpose to do a mitzvah there. Since he's doing the mitzvah, he's going to be exempt. Mishum reshus mitzvah. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer b'ner Hanukkah patur v'neishu reshus mitzvah. He has permission to do the mitzvah there, so he's exempt. And indeed, we say Tashma all these cases where we say that you're allowed to do these things in the public domain. Nevertheless, if they cause damage, you have to pay. Rabbi Yehuda says that if they cause damage, you don't have to pay because you had permission to put it there. So we see from here that Rabbi Yehuda says wherever you have permission to do it, you're exempt from paying. And it's not like the case of our Mishnah that you're liable. So our Mishnah must not be like Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara says, no, I'm Rabbi Nachman Masnisin Rabbi Yehuda. You could say that our Mishnah is at the time where you don't typically have permission to do it because it's not the time where people typically take out the manure. And it even goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. Additional answer is Rav Ashi says, what's the additional answer of Rav Ashi? Rav Ashi says, Tavno Vikasho. That specifically it says the law of our Mishnah that you're liable for taking out the straw. Why? Mishum de Misharki, specifically straw, because it's smoother, and so therefore Rabbi Yehuda would admit it that in this case, because it's more slippery, then you're liable. But when does Rabbi Yehuda say you're exempt? Only when you put out the dung, because dung is not as slippery. Okay, so even though you put it out there, we say whoever comes along and takes it will acquire it. Really? call the man Zach, whoever comes along and takes it, it will acquire it. So Rav says, this law that whoever comes along and takes the straw that was composted into fertilizer, that applies bein begufan, whether you take the straw itself, or bein b'shifchan, or whether you take it after it was improved by people stepping on it. Uziri says, no, what can you take b'shifchan? You could take the improvement of it of a lo begufan, meaning to say you could take the way it improved, but you have to still but the actual straw that you have to leave for the owner. B'maika miflagi. So what's the argument? Rav Safar Konsu Gufan Mishum Shivchan. So Rav's other position that the Chachamim say that if a person put their straw in public, that the sage is penalized, that they lost the actual straw in order to, because that we don't want them to come along and take the improvements in it. Uziri several consul gufa mishum shivchan. The Uziri says they didn't penalize that, but they only said that they lose the improvements, but not the actual straw itself. Tanan, so the Gemara is going to prove like Zeiri, who says that they don't lose the essence of it, because we learned somebody who's flipping the manure in public, and somebody else comes damage on it, he has to pay the damages. But there it doesn't say, in this mission, it doesn't say that the Chachamim say that you could take anything, even though they put it in public in a prohibited manner. So we see from here, like Zeiri, that the sages only say that you lose the shevach, but not the actual thing. The Gemara says no. Tani Oreish, our Mishnah taught the first part, which is about straw. But then what's safe, and the same thing applies, but also by the manure. The Gemara says Vatani la Asura Mishum Gezel. What didn't we say about it that you're prohibited because it's theft? The Gemara says Kikatani Asura Mishum Gezel. That's going back to the first part of the Mishnah as well. Also, that if a person comes along and takes the straw or the manure, they're his. And if somebody comes along and takes it, you're liable for theft. The Gemara says, but didn't we not learn this? Didn't we learn that if somebody takes out the straw or the manure into public to turn into compost, and somebody slips, you're liable. And whoever slips, whoever comes along and takes it, acquires it. And it's not theft. Somebody else, if you flip it, you're going to be liable, and it's prohibited. We see from here that there's a distinction between the straw in the public that the sages declared it ownerless, and to somebody who finds the manure, which are not ownerless. And what's the distinction? We have to say that since the sage is only penalized the improvement, therefore we're not going to penalize the manure, because that's in its natural state. And so this is the problem with Rav. So I'm Rav Namar Yitzchak Gilal Karamis. You're asking a question from manure. Davar sheyesh bo shevach kansu gufo mishum shevcha. Only something which could improve, and the manure is in its state of fertilizer already. So therefore, the sages didn't penalize him. Davar sheyesh bo shevach kansu. Something that doesn't improve, they didn't penalize them. The Gemara asks another question on Rav. Again, what's Rav's position? That Rav says the Katsu Gufa Mishum Shivkan, that you also lose the if you put it in you weren't supposed to, you also lose the goof of it. You also lose the straw itself. So Rav HaOmer Katsu Gufa Mishum Shivkan, the alter kansinan olchi maisi shivcha kansinan. Do we immediately say, when you put it into public, the sages say that anybody else can take it, even though it didn't yet improve, only after it's improved? So the Gemara says, Tashma, midikarinon galal, meaning to say, the Gemara says, from the fact that we posed the question of the manure, and so we see from here that so there's no improvement in the feeding in the manure. And so therefore we see from the Gemara that according to Rav, the sage is penalized immediately, because otherwise why is it a question from the manure? Before Rav Nachman answered this was before the Gemara answered Rav Nachman. With Vaser Deshani Rav Nachman Miiko Mirma Goal Call. But after Rav Nachman answered his question, we didn't have the question for the manure at all, so you can't ask that. So Gemara says, okay, this dispute between Rav and Zeiri is actually a machokas tanaim. Lema ketanai. Let's say that this is actually a machokas tanaim. How so? Let's say you have a contract, shtar shekosov ribis. Let's say you have a contract that in this contract they did a terrible thing and they put interest in it. So we penalize the lender. The person who he can't collect from the borrower, not even the principal. And not only can he not collect the interest, he loses out the principal. That's the position of Rabbi Meir, or as the Chachamim say, Govas a Karen of Velosa Ribis. The Chachamim say can collect the principal, but not the interest. So Lema Rav the Amar Rabbi Meir. So Rav says that he loses also the principal. He must all like Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim Uzeiri the Amar Rabbanan. Zeiri who says that he only loses the interest, but not the principal. He must hold like the Rabbanan. So Rav Rabbanan. No, Rav could say, I could even say like the Rabbanan. Why did the Rabbanan say there that you don't take away the principal? Because the loan was done in a permitted manner. Karen Gufa Kamazik. But here, when you put your straw in public, the straw itself is dangerous. And so therefore the Chachamim say that you can lose the Karen itself, the straw. Ziri Rabbi Meir says I could say like Rabbi Meir. Why? Adkan lo come Rabbi Meir Hasam. Why does Rabbi Meir say his teaching over there? What's his reasoning? Adkan ela de mishas ksiva de avole suma. Because from the moment you wrote the shtar, from that exact moment, the interest was on the borrower. But here, from the moment you put it out, it's not necessarily the case. It's going to cause damage because it didn't do any prohibition yet. Therefore, you can't penalize him. You can only penalize the improvements. And Mer says, let's say that this dispute between Rav and Zeir is like a different machokes. Let's say you take out your straw into public to use it for manure. And somebody else gets hurt by it, Chayav b'niska. We're going to say that the person who does this is responsible for the damages. And whoever comes along and takes it first acquires it. Asur mishum gezel, and he's prohibited on account of theft. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, so the first case was somebody takes out his straw into the public domain, somebody else gets damaged by it, he has to pay for the damages, but yet somebody else can take it and it's prohibited to steal. That's the Tana Kamma. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, that it's not theft at all, you could take it from it. So the Gemara says, but this source itself is internally contradictory. First, you say whoever wants the Tana Kamma says whoever wants to take it can take it, and then you say and you say it's theft. So it must be what are we saying? Whoever comes along can take it, can acquire the improvement. But you're not allowed to steal it. That's like the eerie that you can't take the goof of it. But also Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, I feel the gufan called man zacha. But Rabbi Shimon Gamliel and Rav is consistent with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says that you could even take the goof. So the Gemara says, "Zeiri vadai tanai." Zeiri has no choice, but we have to say that he's following the position of the Tana Kamma here. So. Rav tonight, but does Rav, should we say it's also a machokas tanaim according to the Rav? So no, what would Rav say? Everybody says we penalize the guf because of the improvement. But here the dispute is whether or not you could teach people this halacha, or do we not tell it to them ideally? And that's what he said. The first part of the Brisa says, don't tell people that they could take also the guf. That person can take for himself the principle, but you don't tell people that because it's not good. Rav Barabba says, no, you can even tell them to take it. And is it really the case? Rav Huna said that the peeled barley, he declared it ownerless. And Rav Adabarava Afkir Silikusa, he basically declared that the leftover parts of the dates that they make alcohol from was okay. And Rav Ada bar Ava Kishmaite, and Rav Ada bar Ava, he said that you could do it. El Rav Huna, maybe Rav Huna recanted. So the Gemara says, Hano, these people, mutar and havu. They warned them many times. So this was a specific case where they told them that they could take it from them, even though we said it was halacha, but we don't let people do it. But this case, they specifically allowed them to penalize them to take away their stuff. Okay, this is the powerful Daf Yomi for Shabbos.